thank you all. I don't know if you're non-soccer players or you just decided this was more important than soccer, but we appreciate you coming out. We think we will get more people watching the recording than usual because there are some people watching the FIFA. With announcements, we're going to start the announcement on Porch Fest. If you want to just come up and do a...
Porch Fest is less than 2 weeks away. Have you been seeing these signs all over the neighborhood? No? Okay, yeah, drive around, you'll see them. We've got on the north side of 6th Ave, we have almost 70 porches hosting music. And on the south side of 6th Ave, where I live, we also have about 70 porches hosting music. So there'll be lots to do and lots going on. So just reminding everyone, I'll be in the back if you have any questions, or you can contact us at.
Do you want us to send out a notification just before this? We can do that.
Sure. Yeah.
To our mailing list.
I'm on your mailing list. Can I just respond to that, or can I email?
Once and send it out.
Okay, I'll figure it out. I'll send a thing out. I'll send a thing to the neighborhood council and they'll send it out. We are looking for volunteers, so please sign up. It takes a village to make the festival happen. And it's always better if it's folks from the neighborhood volunteering because it makes it more fun that way. You can sign up yourself or you can sign up a friend. They don't need to know. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. A lot of the volunteer work is really just kind of being in the space and being a point person for a number of porches where, like, if something comes up, you know, they know to look for you. Like, our microphone broke, or we need more flyers or maps or whatever. We also have a merch booth and info booth. We need people to be flaggers to like at key intersections. All the intersections are signed, but it just goes a lot further if we have a flagger there. Some jobs require hauling heavy stuff, but very few. But some people like to haul heavy stuff. Yeah.
What's the date?
July 18th and 19th. 19th on this side, 18th on the south side. Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Couple of other announcements. I voted today because I'm going to be out of town for the election. So if you're going to be out of town, you can get an early ballot that they'll mail to you. And the Connect Tacoma that we did the presentation in June, I think, is on the ballot. And a lot of people are nervous about that. So if you've got questions, please, rather than vote no, ask the question, I guess. But I guess I'm not allowed to be partisan. Yes. August 4th. I think it's on the back. I think I saw it. August 4th, and the ballots will be coming out July 17th. So if you're going to be out of town between the 17th and the 4th, just call and they'll send you a ballot immediately. On to liaison reports. Police. We have our favorite police contingent. And we're not as empty as I was worried we were going to be.
First.
Me first?
Yeah. I always go first.
Hello. For those of you that I have not met, Luke Wallen. This is Kristen Brazil. We're your two-sector CLOs, which covers the entire North End Neighborhood Council and the West End Neighborhood Council as our area of responsibility. And all the 311s come to us, and that keeps us pretty busy. For updates, today is the last FIFA game in Seattle for Tacoma. It was pretty uneventful on the police side for the FIFA activities, so that's a good thing. The Summerfest Saturday went very well with no major incidents. A lot of police presence down there, a lot of people working that day on the police department. side. So that's another good thing. So our summer emphasis continue. We worked one a couple weeks ago, hit up Ruston Way, Titlow Beach, Fred Meyer at 19th and Stevens. Where else were we at? Oh, we hit up all the north end hotspots. Street racing emphasis continue as well. So as a reminder, if you see any street racing as opposed to submitting those to 311, please call the non-emergency number, because if we have officers working that emphasis, they can then go address that in real time. Do you want to talk about Bigfoot?
Sure.
Perfect.
I know, thank you, Luke. It's really fun riding in a car with him all day. I know Bigfoot is a hot topic at this meeting, and it has been for the last few months, but I don't currently have any new updates about the Bigfoot. I'm still receiving 311s from the neighborhood. It's challenging for the police department because the 311s, we really can't address what's being complained about. So if there is a 911 call for service out there, the police respond immediately and handle it. And so we're kind of doing what we can on the police side of it. So when the 311s come to me, I end up having to forward them to code or the city manager's office. But I know that everything's kind of status quo. It's still operating. We're still getting a number of complaints that come in. The city's still investigating and looking into it and trying to determine if there's violations in their in the way that they're operating their business, against the permitted rules for the type of licensing that they have. When we do our north end emphasis that we run all summer long that Luke was just talking about, the Bigfoot area is usually one of the last ones on our stop because it's later into the night or early morning hours when we're out there. And so the last one that we ran, we were out at Titlow Beach, and then an actual call for service came in there. It was a noise complaint. And so we actually took that call from patrol and responded out there. But I don't have much more on our side of it other than that in terms of any progress that's been made or not been made. So if there's any questions about that, I will do my best to answer them. No? Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, you want to take this one or you?
Okay, yes. So
It's a little convoluted, but
the question was about the electrified scooters, e-bikes on the sidewalks. So there's 3 classifications, and I'd have to look at the cheat sheet that came out, but the class 1 and class 2, which I believe are limited to 20 miles per hour, are allowed where bicycles are allowed. They're treated as bicycles, but they actually have to have pedals. So there's some that look similar that don't even have pedals. That would be an electric dirt bike style. So those are not allowed where bicycles are allowed. So if they go 20 or lower, they're treated as bicycles. If they go 20 or faster, they're treated as an electric vehicle. So they would have to be on the roadway. So I know. So I'm sorry, and scooters fall into that category. The ones that you stand on, those fall in the same category, which most of those are designed to go under 20 miles an hour. There are some that are designed to go faster than that. And then there's the one-wheeled one that you straddle and go on. That's considered a scooter as well. So correct. In several areas of the city, they're restricted, like business areas. They are restricted from the sidewalk. But if the bicycle is allowed on the side, if a regular bicycle is allowed on the sidewalk, a powered bicycle or scooter that goes under 20 miles an hour would also be allowed on the sidewalk. So as the city continues to make all the improvements funded by Vision Zero, bike lanes get added, roads get painted. Not all those are connected yet, but you'll see those throughout the city to improve the roadway areas for the bicycle. So yes, 20 miles an hour is very fast on the side. Correct. You're supposed to ride with the traffic and walk against traffic. So,
They have to follow the rules of the road. That's what the RCW that came out says.
correct. And the challenge is when we do see it, if we go to address it, by the time we go to make a traffic stop or contact them, usually they're gone or we can't turn around on them in traffic. Because we have to weigh the balance of conducting the traffic stop, like safely conducting the traffic stop. There is an age limit. I'd have to look. I thought it was 16.
Yeah, if the motorized scooter or bicycle, whether it's pedal assist or not pedal assist, goes over 28 miles per hour, they have to be 16 to ride it.
And have a license.
Yeah. So, because again, rules of the road, and those ones obviously go almost 30. And a lot of these electric bikes that are coming out, you can make them go up to 60, 70 miles an hour. And so obviously can't be on any type of a sidewalk or where pedestrians are, because it's just not safe. So yeah, that's what they determined was 16.
More questions?
It's a gray area right now too. I know you're like, oh my gosh. Oh wait, I think everybody kind of feels that way. It just came out a couple of weeks ago is when you sent it out to us.
One of the challenges too is that
Yeah.
yeah, sure. That specific situation, yes, right? Assuming I know exactly what the people go. Well, however, right now we're very informational in terms of our contacts with the make contact, all number of rules and such, and it's a big education campaign. A lot of the electric ribbon stuff is very new to most people, and I don't give parents and stuff on anything. They really just don't realize that some of that's regulated and some of that's not. So education starts to try pretty heavily. That's kind of step one.
And don't be surprised if you don't see that kind of evolve. Like you said, it's new, and so the state is trying to establish guidelines as well as to how to regulate these things. Like, for example, one thing that's not regulated yet is whether or not they need to wear a helmet on a motorcycle in the state of Washington. A helmet is required. On a bicycle, it is not. And this electric bike that goes somewhere between the speed of how fast you can pedal on a bicycle and what a motorcycle would go is in between. And it's just this gray area. So there's not even a guideline established on that yet. So I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see this kind of evolve as the months come, months and years go on. So.
Jeff, next.
Yeah, about the 4th of July and fireworks. Any news about Mortar Mike going on? Apparently there was an incident over here, not too far over. There was somebody setting off mortars and neighbors came out to complain, and one got kicked over. It was still hot and burned. One of the neighbors. Is there any news about that? Oh. No, you don't get caught on fire too.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, so you're not hearing anything about that?
We in CLO land have not heard anything. That obviously patrol would have responded to that and addressed it and taken care of it. But we don't hear about all of the patrol calls that go on throughout the evening. Unfortunately, if you can imagine, the screen, our call load screen, it fits at about 100 plus calls for service for most of the day and night on the 4th of July. So yeah, it's something I could definitely look into, and I have your email. I can follow up with you. If there's any information to pass along, I could certainly do that. But yeah, this is the first I'm hearing of it.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
I understand this guy has a history with police.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So seems to be another incident, and just kind of wondering if there's going to be
Sure.
any action.
Yeah, sure. I'll look into it and I'll get back to you. I don't want to misspeak or, I need to read the report and see who we're talking about and whatnot.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Jody,
Of course.
question then,
Yeah, so getting back to, sidewalk, that's motorized vehicle. So you said if long as they can go below 20 miles an hour, can you get the sidewalk?
So the way I understood it is it's not super easy to understand because there's a lot of ifs and buts in there. But if it actually pedals and it goes below 20 miles an hour, it's in the same category as just a regular pedal bicycle. For any, whether powered or not powered. There are certain areas in the city where bicycles are like 6th Avenue Business District, Proctor District. In those high pedestrian areas, bicycles are not allowed on the sidewalks, and that's for pedestrian and bicycle safety.
You say.
So there is a notice of infraction for bicycle and pedestrian violations. Yeah. You don't, that's a civil issue. Yep.
Let's move to the question that we just covered. Oh. Jody?
No, I was just going to comment that typically the people who are lighting things are younger.
Yep.
Always, they're younger, in which case their parents own insurance would be the recipient of the lawsuit. That's not right. In a matter of motorized, owns insurance of why they
Yeah.
Any more questions on any other subjects? If not, I'd like a round of applause for our police. And I'm going to segue into, because we don't have either of our council members or our city manager's representative, what we do as the board of the North End Neighborhood Council is we do get involved in some of these policy issues. So here's one that I think is something that we as a board would like to get involved in, is what are the regulations about electric bikes? Is there something that the city should be doing? And so, especially as we don't have John and Sarah or Christina here today, there's various issues that we as a board may be taking up, and we would welcome feedback from the membership. One of the ones that is out there is the mega data centers. That's got quite a lot of attention from different parts of the city. So if you have an opinion one way or the other, please reach out to us. It's something that we may take a position on or we may not, but at least we can get some information for you. The other one that came up several months ago was the RV parking in the North End. We have a couple of occasions with people in RVs who know the rules. They do their 72 hours of parking and then they get moved and they do another 72 hours and then they come back. The city just sent out a notice today that they are going to do some revisions in the parking ordinance, which is a perfect opportunity for this to be addressed. So it's something we've already reached out to John and Sarah to say, hey, the city of Auburn has a requirement that they don't allow overnight on city streets. You can't camp overnight. If you're a homeowner, you can go and get a permit so that your visitor can sit in a RV for 3 days. So I think that's another opportunity for us to reach out and do it. And as you are also maybe aware, the new city manager is doing a cost-saving exercise. So we will be trying to schedule him to come in, and I'm not quite sure what the outreach efforts are on that. And then the other, on behalf of both Sarah and John, they both have newsletters. If you're not getting their monthly newsletter, they get sent out either at the end of the month or the beginning of the month. You just go on and you can register to receive those. So, Josh, do we have John from Tacoma Power on or not? Okay. We have heard from Tacoma Power that they want to come and speak to us about a rate change that will be coming later in the year. So we will be scheduling that. And I'm going to now delighted to welcome Leslie from the library, who is going to give an update on the library system. We do like to get the library once or twice a year, and Leslie has been fabulous in being willing to come and speak to us. So the floor is yours.
Can everyone hear me okay? All right, so I think I recognize a lot of faces, but if you don't know me, my name is Leslie Caldwell. I'm the Collections and Technical Services Manager at Tacoma Public Library, and I'm also a North End resident. So what I have here is just a quick presentation on what we've been doing in the last year, and then our strategic priorities moving forward. Spoiler alert, they really haven't changed much, so it shouldn't be a huge shock to anyone. But we'll get started, and hopefully I know how to use this remote. Nope. Oh, there we go. Maybe just a little delay. Okay, so this is just our mission and vision and what we try to do here at the library. We want to bring the community together. We want to be radically welcoming, just to be a center where every Tacoman can come in and feel welcome. That's our goal. So last year, we had about 500,000 visitors to our libraries. Of those visitors, we had 1.1 billion in-person checkouts. So for those saying that print books are dead, that is not true. We answered about 100,000 questions, offered 3,000 programs, had 500,000 digital checkouts, so your ebooks, 80,000 computer sessions. This is a huge use of our library. So for those of us who aren't using the library for books, many people are using for computers and printing. And then using our Wi-Fi as well. So a lot of growth. Things really slowed down during the pandemic, but we're getting back up to our normal numbers again. Here's a little bit about our budget. So we have a teeny tiny budget, a little sliver of the city. And then you'll notice that my budget is that first one, collections and materials. So everything that's purchased for the library. And the majority of our budget is that our neighborhood libraries. So that's what really takes up the bulk of what we do, is keeping the libraries open. Our strategic priorities are equity and access, learning, creativity, and innovation, investment in youth, cultivating and engaging community, and being responsible and having resilient stewardship of the budget that I just mentioned. So like I said, we did look at our strategic priorities and try to evaluate if we should change them at all. So we started last year with an online survey, and we received 1,800 responses. Many of those were from the North End. We also had in-person voting opportunities for folks that came into the branches, and we got 17,000 responses there. We had 15 community interviews and 86 staff survey responses that led to the rehash of our strategic priorities. So equity and access, providing accessible, culturally relevant resources, spaces, and services that are welcoming to all. And here we're just showing how we're going to measure that. So that's our goal. How will we measure it? Are things checking out? Are people coming in? Are we answering questions? Are people working with our social worker, et cetera? So in the last 5 years, these are just some of the ways that we hope to meet that goal of equity and access. So we added a world languages collection. So we now have Spanish is our #1 world language use here in Tacoma. We have museum and local attraction passes that can be checked out. We have sensory accessibility kits, as well as STEAM backpacks for children who want to check out a whole activity. Oh, and we added video games, which was really exciting. We did that last year, and it's really brought a lot of teens into the library, which I know is a little bit of a controversial topic, but it was our goal, right? We would love to have the teens with us than somewhere else. And then next, learning creativity and innovation. So cultivating curiosity, creativity, and nurturing innovation to support lifelong learning. So that's us adult learners, right? We get to keep learning too, not just the kiddos. And how are we going to measure that success? So technology usage, program attendance, who goes to the Northwest room, right? So that's what we're going to be looking at. And over the last 5 years, we did a lot in the Northwest room. We worked with the Community Archive Center to add oral histories from folks all over Tacoma who can tell us about the history of living here. In addition, we did a lot of technology programming. We had a podcast cafe. We offered certifications for folks needing to learn how to use different software, for example. We offer Ways Goose. This happens once a year, which is a huge program of letter arts and book arts that happens. It used to be at King Books, and now it's at the main library. It's a one-day event, and we have just tons of artists and lots of activity. We also partner with Tacoma Creates to basically give more programming than the library could ever offer, right? So on our limited budget, we can only do a certain amount of programming. Tacoma Creates partnership allows us to offer a lot of really cool stuff that we wouldn't be able to do. But it's a wonderful partnership. Investment in youth. So that's one of our strategic priorities, is to invest in young people, to prioritize services, programs, and partnerships that support learning, development, and belonging. We want to measure that by making sure that our materials check out, that kids attend programs, that we go to school visits, and that we do summer reading. So right now we're in the midst of a summer reading initiative right now. So you can kind of see that, like I mentioned, if you look at that graph on the left, things slowed down, right, after the pandemic, but we're getting back up to higher numbers in participation. That specifically is for folks that had signed up for summer learning and those that completed it. We also offer 100 books before kindergarten. So that's for our really littles, that parents can come in and see what books to read, and they can get a certificate when they're done. And then my department works directly with Tacoma Public Schools to do a pathway partnership. And basically that means that any student at Tacoma Public Schools gets a library card automatically that they can use online. So often in classes, teachers will use our online resources, and the students can just log on without having to come into the library and actually sign up for a card. They're just already in there. And it's a really exciting program. We had the Story Walk at Alder Park, which is up in Northeast Tacoma. We have Up and Atom STEAM Learning Days, so science, technology, engineering, art, and math. All right, let's see. Another strategic priority is to cultivate and engage community. So to serve as a community hub for social connection, meeting, and collaboration. How are we going to measure that success? We want new library cards. We want active library cards, people using the library, people signing up, going to the Tacoma Reads event and reading the Tacoma Reads title, and then the partnerships like the pathway that I mentioned. Those are how we can look and say, are we engaging with the community? So speaking of Tacoma Reads, last year we had Valerie Carr come and do See No Stranger with the mayor, and it was a really emotional, like, a little bit hippy-dippy event that I think people really enjoyed. They loved the connections, and it was really inspirational for folks. And this year, I don't know if you've heard, but we're going to have Citizenship by Daisy Hernandez. She's a journalist, and she's written a book about citizenship and her experiences as a Cuban American. So it's very relevant to what's going on right now in our country, and she'll be here on October 1st to speak with the mayor, Mayor Ibsen, about the book. Let's see, we also got a new logo and branding. These are some of the partnerships that I mentioned. We've got Bloodworks Northwest, Tacoma Community Court, which is there every Thursday, Tacoma Needle Exchange. And then finally, our last strategic priority is responsible and resilient stewardship. So using our resources responsibly to ensure efficient operations, resilient facilities, and a vibrant library system for future generations. And how do we measure that? Building improvement projects, they have to happen. All of our libraries are small and they are old, and we have to continue to maintain them. And then staff professional development and our library foundation. So the folks who raise money for us, that's been really growing over the last few years, and that's very helpful because, as we all know, the city doesn't have a huge budget right now. So to have a foundation that can support us is awesome. So here are some examples of being responsible and resilient. We did a facilities condition and assessment study to see where our branches are and where we need the most work. We also serve as voters' points of assistance. So during elections, we can help folks get registered and could answer questions and things like that during elections. And there's our foundation board that I was talking about, and a little bit about our policy development. And that's quickly everything that you have to know about what the library's done in the last 5 years and where we're headed. Does anyone have any questions for me? Yes. Oh, nice. Oh, thank you. That's awesome. I will let our IT team know. Yeah. Yes.
Teenagers doing research,
Mm-hmm.
pride in research skills as they got more and more involved with the internet.
Yeah.
Some public libraries doing anything to help kids learn and maintain research skills and learn how to use AI and incorporate that into their toolbox.
That's a great question. That's something that is related to that partnership with the Tacoma Public Schools. So we have, I believe at the moment, 6 youth services librarians across the city, and they work directly with the librarians in the schools to do programming like that and other things. So I would say, I can't think of any programming specifically off the top of my head, but I know that our youth librarians work specifically on those research skills and how to fact check and things like that directly with the librarians at Tacoma Public Schools. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what I think you might be speaking of is called a library of things. So less of books. Yeah. So we have a few things like that. We have Wi-Fi hotspots are the biggest, I would say, most successful non-book circulating thing that we have right now. There's a lot of folks still can't afford internet, so we have the hotspots. We do have the Tacoma Tool Library who works with us at the main library, although that isn't actually us. There are things of that nature. I don't know about checking out any experts, but that's really an interesting concept that I could ask about. But we have a few things that are like a library of things where you're checking out like an object or a piece of technology, podcast kits, things like that. that aren't just a book. Yeah. Yeah, I guess so.
So, well, for listening.
Thank you, everyone.
I'm assuming that the Proctor branch is still the heaviest.
Yes,
checkout.
the Wheelock branch is by far our busiest and has the most checkouts. It is a really lively center that we're really thankful to have as an institution. So, yep. Yes, thank you for using the library.
Thank you. Okay, now, next presentation, I'm delighted to invite Brian Boudet to come up. Home in Tacoma has been a hot issue in the North End and in the city for a long time. Apart from the Cushman redevelopment, I think it's been the one that's got the most interest and energy from our group. So Brian's here to give us an update a year after its implementation. So go ahead.
Thank you. And pleasure to be here. I love hot issues, I guess. So really, this is the basics here is a presentation that we gave to the city council within the last month or two. So one of the things that we committed to at the staff level and the council really asked for was making sure that as Home in Tacoma got implemented, that we were constantly coming back and checking in with council to see kind of what's going on, what's working, what's not working. They really wanted to make sure that the goals are being met at some level. And so there is a mandated review at year 3, but we're really doing updates on a much more regular basis than that. So I'll talk a little bit about what is Home in Tacoma, and then also kind of what we saw over the first year of Home in Tacoma and what we've been hearing from community, the development community, and others during that time period. So one quick note that's always important, housing cost has become a rather significant challenge in Tacoma. This is not new news. This is really the last 10, 15 plus years as we've seen housing prices go up basically at double the rates of incomes, has really been sort of running away from the average consumer. And so the city, this is about 8 years ago, adopted the Affordable Housing Action Strategy. And it laid out, I think it was 27 different measures really designed to help address housing affordability. 1 or 2 of those actually relate to Home in Tacoma. So part of the message here is that Home in Tacoma is not the end-all be-all when it comes to housing affordability. It's one of many strategies that the City Council is working on and putting in place. But Home in Tacoma is a big deal. Zoning is one of the more significant authorities that local governments have. What stuff can be built where? And Home in Tacoma, over the 3 or 4 years that policy conversation happened, resulted in pretty much a complete rewrite of our residential zoning requirements and allowances. What had traditionally been a focus on single-family zones in the city of Tacoma since at least the 1950s, the vast majority of the city had been allocated for single-family residential areas. Home in Tacoma changed that and essentially eliminated single-family exclusive zoning. You see the map here. It's confusing, but basically there's 3 zones in here: UR1, UR2, and UR3. The lowest of those zones, the UR1, allows for 4 units per lot, and then you can see it goes up from there. Now, important to recognize that the city of Tacoma is not the only one struggling with this challenge or trying to do anything about it. Much of what ended up being Home in Tacoma has actually been mandated by the state. So the state in 2023 adopted a new state law that essentially outlaws single-family zoning statewide. And so about, I don't know, I would just say the majority of what Home in Tacoma is actually now mandated by the state really across the board. Part of what Home in Tacoma also tried to do was, while allowing for increased housing choice and increased housing supply and trying to address affordability challenges, to try to make sure that housing at least reasonably fits in. We're talking about bigger stuff here, so reasonably fits in with existing single-family neighborhoods, because the city's essentially built in the way that it is. Everything we're talking about here is pretty much infill housing development, so it's a new thing coming into what is probably an established neighborhood. And if it's a duplex or a fourplex or townhouses or whatever, in most cases is inherently going to be a little bit in people's minds sort of out of character. And so how do you best fit that in? So the council looked at how to control density to some extent. The council looked at how to try to preserve trees and require new trees. That was a big issue that came from a lot of community members as part of the Home in Tacoma initiative, as well as trying to provide some incentives for preserving existing homes. Certainly the easiest, most sensitive ad is to keep the house and put an accessory dwelling unit in the backyard or something like that. And I know folks undoubtedly here and in other parts of town have been seeing those kinds of development go up in their neighborhood. So I mentioned, this was really an initiative to try to facilitate more growth, to increase the diversity of housing types that's allowed in our traditional single-family neighborhoods, and to try to remove barriers to facilitate that. So you can see a list here of some of the changes that council ultimately adopted in that package, but reducing setbacks, simplifying height limits. They added in a new standard related to just the mass of housing that you can put on a lot. So the size of the total of the buildings is really the primary control. But that limit is notably bigger than the historic development pattern in most of our neighborhoods. They also allowed for and try to facilitate home ownership through some tools like unit lot subdivisions, which allows you to, it's sort of like a condo of a different name that tries to allow for division of property where you can separate off the accessory dwelling unit or separate off the townhomes into separate lots to still preserve some ownership opportunities. Big initiative on the part of council as well. The graphic here just shows some of the housing types that Home in Tacoma allows. And I will say the houseplex, which is kind of a funny term, really is everything from a single family house all the way up to a sixplex. And so single family is still allowed. The city still sees single family housing come in, not an uncommon permitting type. There's no doubt that that's still a very attractive development type, and we will continue to see that. So what's happened? And it's interesting in part because at the city, we've actually seen a pretty notable slowdown in permitting activity starting in 2025. So really the last couple of years have been down to some extent. And that's really at some level, not even just in Tacoma, that's been seen kind of across the Puget Sound region to some extent. The hot market seems to be cooling off a little bit. And so less folks coming, less demand, not exactly like turning the trend around by any stretch of the imagination, but we've definitely seen a little bit of a slowdown. But even despite that, we definitely in the permitting department saw an increase in these sort of middle housing types and the small residential development types. So you can see the increase there in that first year of Home in Tacoma in both total units and total number of permits than we had seen from prior years. Now, as far as what types have we seen, also has been really interesting. Like I say, Home in Tacoma allowed for a wide variety of housing types in residential neighborhoods. What we have seen the most of, other than single family, is duplexes and townhouses, which tracks reasonably well along with what much of the market information was telling us from prior to Home in Tacoma. Partly because duplexes are relatively simple still to build. They tend to fall under the same building requirements as single-family homes, very similar construction. A lot of the lending tools that exist out in the world to support single-family that the federal government has put in place, a lot of times those also work for duplexes and townhouses also, because again, it sort of tries to identify this sweet spot of a little more density, but still having at some level your own walls and your own piece of land, right? As opposed to people living on top of other people. So still meets much of what I think the basic market desires are sometimes for single family ownership, but in a little bit denser style. Also important to recognize this is just year one. So we're only 1 year into this. Development obviously takes time, to buy land and put the deals together and get the financing and get the permits and build things. It doesn't happen quickly. And so that's certainly true, particularly of the larger projects. I think the overall market trend that we have seen has impacted larger projects more than smaller projects, but at the same time, bigger ones simply take more time to put all of those things together. So that may also be part of the reason why haven't seen a lot of the multifamily style yet. Now, as far as where, probably hard to see on this map, but there's a whole bunch of little dots all over the place. The dots both represent a project, and then the size of the dot represents the number of units in the project. So you'll see some larger dots and some smaller dots. You can also, the colors on there specifically relate to the type of dwelling units that they are. But in general, there was a lot of concern going through the Home in Tacoma project that either all of the projects would happen in one part of the town, or none of the projects would happen in one part of town, depending on who you asked and what their concerns were. I guess what I would report is that in general, new units have been fairly well dispersed throughout the city. You can see over on the left side a little bit of number of projects in the north end and east side being a little bit higher, undoubtedly tied into demand as well as availability of land and space, other things like that, particularly on the east side where we tend to have a little bit lower densities traditionally in the city. But at the same time, I think when you look at the number of units, that has been less so in the north end and a little bit more so in the south end and the east side. So again, depending on how you measure it, fairly well distributed throughout the city. So what were some of the takeaways, I guess, from the first year? First of all, we definitely saw some movement. There's no doubt about that we have seen projects. You all have seen projects undoubtedly in the neighborhood that probably weren't allowed 5 years ago that are now popping up. We definitely have seen an increase in diversity of housing types, which was one of the goals, again, seeing some stuff other than just single family, the accessory dwelling units, the duplexes, the townhouses, those kinds of things to provide a greater variety of housing types in our residential neighborhoods. And we've seen a general increase in both the number of applications and the number of units in each of those applications. At the same time, like I say, it's pretty early. So I think at the staff level, we're certainly not taking away any grand messages from the first year. Many of the projects are still in the works, under construction. So particularly when we talk about compatibility and the sort of before and after and how well do things fit in, sometimes it's difficult to assess that when you're still in the middle of creating the project out there. So a few examples. You probably will recognize some of these because some of these are in the north end. A number of detached ADUs or backyard buildings. Some people like, some people don't. It just depends. And here's some examples of duplexes and row houses or townhouses, and which actually, from a townhouse perspective, we only had one project that was under construction, so that's why you don't see a finished project yet. As far as an example, like I say, as we continue on through this, we'll start getting more completed examples. And then we had a couple of mixed projects where they were doing a duplex in the front and an ADU in the back or stuff like that. I know there was one in the newspaper on, I think it was 26th or 30th, 26th, I think, that a lot of people talked about. Timelines, how long does it take to get things? This has been another focus for the department that I'm in, is trying to get permits out quicker. I will say that's a challenge in the sense of staffing, and with reduced permitting loads comes reduced revenues. And so that also translates generally into reduced staffing. But in general, have been pretty successful about trying to bring down permit timelines. This is something that the department's continuing to focus on. We actually have a middle housing pilot program right now that we're working on, and I think reporting back to the city council in a couple weeks on that. What have we heard? There's been a lot of the first one. I didn't know I could do that. People come into the counter and interested in how they can use their property, or real estate agents calling or whatever, and not understanding that, oh yeah, you can do other things than you might currently see in the neighborhood today on a piece of property. We are seeing developers use the home in Tacoma allowances. I will say there's still a lot of folks trying to figure out how it works and what it adds up to, because it came along with a number of new standards, and trying to fit all the stuff onto the property is not necessarily easy. You got to fit the housing units on there, you got to fit the trees on there, you got to meet the setbacks. So, well, you got utilities and garbage and all the other things that you're trying to also squeeze on there. So the idea of 4 units or 6 units is sometimes a little bit of a theoretical concept. When you actually try to put it all on there, you don't necessarily always get that. So we definitely hear that frustration sometimes on the development community side as well. And then there's, just the general understanding of single family zoning. I think that's still something that just culturally is a big deal. Generations and generations of single family being kind of the quintessential American dream concept, right? And how neighborhoods should be developed. Well, moving away from that is obviously a big deal and a challenge for a lot of folks. So again, from developers, sort of mixed bag, honestly. Some of them are finding their path through the new standards. Some of them are frustrated with the standards and wish there was more or less of something required. The parking and internal walkway requirements, I think, are things that people are bumping into and struggling. The tree requirements is a very common one that developers express concerns about. And the unit lot subdivision, which again is that sort of condo concept, is something that we're continuing to hear concerns about, not necessarily working as smoothly as folks would like. On the infrastructure side, like I say, the general slowdown in the market, a lot of it driven by the cost of materials, the cost of labor, and the cost of lending in particular. So we certainly hear that a lot from the development community, concerns about that. And because of that, there's, I think, a continuing push to look for ways in which the city can reduce costs, the city can reduce barriers and things. And then from the community, again, sort of early. So I'm excited to hear from you all about early impressions, but certainly we have heard concerns from the community about change, and parking and traffic are the most common things that come up from community members. One of the flexibilities that the staff has availed itself of is a couple of directors' rules. So this is a mechanism by which the director of planning and development services can basically provide clarification. One of those, I'll just use an example because they're really not that exciting, but it's like heat pumps, like where can you put your heat pump? And so there were a lot of limitations in there about where you can put heat pumps, not allowing them to be on the front. And so this allows that with screening and things like that. So as long as they're not obtrusive to the front of a property. Because obviously if you're putting multiple units on, you only have so many walls, so many yards to even incorporate the utility infrastructure that a unit needs. And I mentioned the required review and code update. So this is something when we went to council a couple of months ago, is a bit of a hanging question. I will say there's kind of mixed opinions on the council about whether or not we should reopen this book or not. It obviously was a huge effort and is very controversial. At the same time, there are definitely things that we hear from the community and from the development side that people are interested in making adjustments and tweaking, and could be good things to look at. At the same time, I mentioned that the state a couple of years ago actually mandated a significant portion of this. Well, they've continued to do a lot of bills over the last few years that's mandating local governments like Tacoma make changes. Whereas, and I think it's been a bit of a sea change, honestly. I mean, if you think back, really not since the early 90s when the state adopted the Growth Management Act, has the state really taken a big push on how development should occur in cities. And that basically said, growth should happen in cities and not out in the farms and forests. but it was left at a fairly high policy level. Well, now the state over the last few years has really started to dig deep into local zoning requirements and try to identify what they feel like are barriers. And the legislature is really taking their authority and putting that on cities. So I mentioned a couple of things on here, and I know Peter already mentioned a little bit about, parking is another one that's coming up that the state has mandated, but there's a couple of things in here specific to residential development around unit lot subdivisions and lot splitting that will basically force the city to reopen portions of this code. But the real question from a policy perspective to council is, do they want to open up the broader issues of how much density, what housing types, what are the tree requirements, what are the setback requirements, all those kinds of things. At this point, I haven't heard a whole lot of excitement around reopening that, but we will see as we continue to see development happen. And I think as more projects finish, undoubtedly that will push the council to reconsider that. So this is kind of the 1 year in. Home in Tacoma was adopted in late 2024, launched in February of 2025. So this was kind of the 1 year in data analysis. We are continuing to update this information, and probably will have another report out in the next month or two to reflect kind of the, we're approaching the year and a half in, I guess, or we'll probably shift over to more of a calendar year reporting, because that'll make a lot more sense than February's to most folks. So we're looking at having data go out, like I say, in the next month or two, and then hoping to have a dashboard later in the summer. So that would give people the idea, give you the ability to go in and actually look at the data and dissect it to some extent yourselves, and look in particular neighborhoods or look at particular housing types and get a better sense for what is happening out in the community. And then I mentioned the Home in Tacoma update. Still a question mark about when, if, and what the scope of something like that would be. Might be the end. And I realize I didn't introduce myself. That's like the worst faux pas. You sort of introduced me. So, but anyways, I'm Brian Boudet, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Planning and Development Services Department. So with that, happy to answer questions.
Since that I actually did give Brian in advance, we had discussion among the board as to what were the hot issues. Brian's already come back and said some of that is the council, that's not planning, but perhaps you could wear your Home in Tacoma and your planning hat and address some of this issue. One of the hot questions, the second time I said hot, is to do with neighborhood density instead of downtown redevelopment. Mm-hmm. And I think there is a lot of concern that sort of the whole downtown revitalization has stalled, and there is space and there are services, and I think people would rather see the planned growth in the population occurring where the services, the buses, the transit and everything is. So could you address that?
Yeah, so the truth is that from a policy perspective, it's a both strategy. The city continues to have significant growth happening in the downtown, and certainly allows for a huge amount. Our downtown is actually very big compared to other cities in the area. So we have a lot of capacity downtown. At the same time, as I said, the state actually mandated that we upzone all the neighborhoods too. So from the state's perspective, it's not an either or. They are continuing to double down on facilitating growth in high transit areas in particular is something that they're continuing to do. We have another bill that got adopted, I think this last year, that will force us to upzone pretty significant areas around downtown, areas where we have the light rail system operating. So the state is basically pushing both. The city is responding to that. At some level, yes, from a pure capacity standpoint, if you did the analysis, it would show that we have dramatically more capacity than we are theoretically required to have. But at the same time, the state doesn't give us those options to say only there. But recognize that one building downtown that might be 200 units is a whole lot of duplexes out in a neighborhood. So in the same way that one project in Proctor that has 150 units, it takes an awful lot of duplexes or townhouse projects in the middle of the neighborhood or ADUs to equate to one of those. So Still, the significant amount of growth is happening in the downtown. It's just the downtown is huge, and so it's sometimes hard to feel it. So I will say, I mean, I've been working downtown for 26 years, and I look out the window, and the St. Helens neighborhood is like notably different, probably in that 26 years. But if you look south, it doesn't look that much different. You know, I mean, there's certainly a few buildings that weren't there, but not that many.
It's a good segue into one of the other issues was the funding. The state is putting all of these requirements on the city.
Mhm.
Is the state coming through with any funding? Because there's a lot of, this is putting obviously a burden on the services, the infrastructure that's there.
Sure. The the large answer is not really. I mean, I think one of the challenges is that zoning is sort of seen often as a free lever to pull. It's like, oh yeah, we can change the zoning, and it doesn't necessarily cost a lot of money. The truth is, it does at some level from a local jurisdiction's perspective to simply go through these sort of policy projects and change the code, but it doesn't necessarily, in the same way of actually funding affordable housing, it doesn't cost dollars in that same way. So this, at the same time, we do get resources from the state. I mean, I think if you've heard a presentation recently from our Public Works Department about the Connect Tacoma initiative, I know you mentioned the upcoming election. That's one of the things on the August ballot. Is, you know, the city is fairly good at taking resources that we generate locally from taxes and going to get federal or state or regional money to sort of, you know, capitalize on that, like at a 3-to-1 ratio or something like that, I think. So yes, there are grant dollars that come to the city. We do go out and get that money to make improvements, but that hasn't necessarily changed a lot in the same way that the state has been changing the mandates on local governments for zoning change.
So affordability, when Home in Tacoma was first promoted, was to do with affordable housing. And your presentation is very much to do with units, developments, permits. Are you monitoring the affordability? And what we read and hear is that the affordability, I think you may have mentioned, rents are certainly going up higher than income. So is that part of Home in Tacoma, or is that potential? You're talking about future monitoring and future changes. Will that be part of it?
I guess I don't want to overstate the amount of data that the city has or will be able to track. Certainly affordability is one of the focuses for Home in Tacoma. It is one of the focuses for why the state adopted the bill that it adopted. You know, and certainly there is an underlying principle here of allowing more units on the same size lot inherently does reduce at some level the land costs, some of the construction costs and things like that. At the same time, anybody that looks at a new housing unit, and I don't care if it's a house or a duplex or an ADU or a townhouse or any of those, will see that a new housing unit is not cheap by any stretch. It simply is expensive to build things, and if anybody's built something, I mean, if you build a garage in the last, 5 or 10 years, you've seen how expensive it is, or done a kitchen remodel or whatever it is. Labor and materials are very expensive. So Home in Tacoma at some level is trying to address that, but the truth is it's a very long curve, both in what gets developed. There's a lot of inertia in the system to continue to create single-family homes. And I don't say that as a bad thing. I mean, single-family homes are perfectly fine, but the system has been built around building primarily single-family homes for 80 years, probably, for the most part. And that's not going to shift quickly at all. And we certainly won't see housing costs shift quickly, I think, either. But so we are doing some tracking, but it's really also challenging because the factors in what is the cost of housing are so much beyond what the city can honestly control. I mean, Seattle's more expensive than Tacoma. Is that because their zoning is way different than ours? No. Is it because construction costs are way different than they are in Tacoma? No. I mean, Seattle is just a much more popular place than Tacoma is, for the good and the bad of that. And that, there's more people wanting to live in Seattle, and the price of housing in Seattle subsequently is notably more than it is in Tacoma. So, I mean, the housing market is a private market. The city controls relatively small portion of that private market. Housing is built by people, by developers, and in large part, it's a system designed to make money and at some level maximize the making of money. And that has certainly a shift that we've seen in the last few decades as well. So. Please.
A lot, about 10,000 square feet of large.
Yeah. Cool.
So we were looking at bringing one of our two garages, we bring one of our garages into the AD. So what I've been doing was looking up your fees.
Mm-hmm.
What's the cost of different things? And here with the it's extremely hard to figure out what fees for the library.
Okay.
Section 17C up here. After I go through pages and pages and pages, I found what those fees are. Now, what you haven't told people is in 2026 to 2027, there's going to be a big increase in some of the fees. So the bottom line is, it's very hard to find this stuff. So if the city or whoever does this website could put, for example, if you want to build a DAU, these are the possible fees you'll have. If you just want to build a new building, these are the possible fees you'll have. That's above and beyond what the construction costs you were just talking about. You have to understand about all these fees. So my husband and I are friends with a lot of realtors, but we're also friends with a lot of construction companies here in the town. And our lot is averaging based on who you talk to between 575 and 600. That's what we're going to tax. To build 1,000 square foot DAU will cost almost 600,000. If you include all those fees on top of the cost of construction. So what we would like to know is, are there any incentives for us people, especially some of us that are retired and work all that money, try to get money out of bank, or maybe part of what we already owe, or what we've already paid on the house, try to get some of that money. But what incentives or discounts or whatever would you expect us to get from the city or the state on all those fees plus any other incentives? If you really want us to build these things, we can't afford it. Most of us, I mean, some people in the North Bay are making decent money, not all of us are, and some of us are retired.
Sure. Yeah, I will say fees in general, probably in the 5 to 10% range of a project cost is usually kind of where that lands. I do wonder what, because I see section 17C, that makes me think of Pierce County, not Tacoma. So hopefully you're, yeah.
And if you go by this section 17C, fees that I was presuming that we have to do is almost $5,000. It's going to go up next year. And then the other cost is the water, electricity, wastewater, gas, all that other stuff. You really want us to build, you have to give us some insight and clarify that website.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate the comment and the research you've been doing. So I'll have to take a look and see what we have. I know we have like an ADU handbook. I don't know what level of detail it goes into on specific fees and okay, like you're saying, and they constantly change at some level. So that's tricky. I know to your broader question about incentives, I mean, one of the things that the city's done is create pre-approved ADU plans. So there are a stock set of plans that you can come into the city. You can find them online as well and see. You found all for them. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. So, yeah, the home in Tacoma didn't change the view sensitive overlay or the specific height limits associated with that. So in areas where the height limit is 20 or 25, it stays at that level. So I know folks have probably seen buildings going up that are quite tall. I'm thinking specifically of the one by Metropolitan Market in the alley there that is quite tall, partly because it's up on a hill too, but very tall ADU in the backyard of a house over there. Yeah, but that scale of housing is not that height is not allowed in the view sensitive district either. Mhm. Uh, yes, so covenants like that, I mean, didn't really come into vogue till like in the 40s, essentially. And yeah, it's pretty common in development since then that they've included certain restrictions, basically a private covenant amongst the owners about what can or cannot happen on the properties. Some of those really awful ones about what kinds of people can live there or not live there. But it's certainly not uncommon that one of the first covenant in there will say you can only have one single family house on the property. That's pretty common. So in those areas, yeah, those covenants still exist. They are private agreements between the owners, and the zoning does not trump that. So, that's reasonable, yeah. I would translate it more to the city wants to give you more flexibility in how you use your property.
Me as a homeowner and my sewer upgrading next to me, am I gonna have to pay that because we're not asking developers to pay that? And is any other city inflicted a Helmut too on their population other than, I mean, I don't, hit one was state mandate, hit two is just Tacoma's own special little infliction, so.
The as far as impact fees, which is a good one because it gets to the question about infrastructure needed for new growth. This is something that the city has not had in place for ever, and most jurisdictions around us have had impact fees for a long time. So, as you probably know, the city council just adopted impact fees. They just went into place they launched on June 1st, and we also have system development charges for storm and sanitary sewer that also just went into place on July 1st. So that is one significant move that the council made to try to help make sure that new development is paying for the cost of infrastructure upgrades associated with the increased demand of new development. So I know that's always been one of the questions is how much do the general ratepayers get to pay versus how much are the developers paying. Now, specifically when it comes to a project, let's just say a project's going in next to you, and as part of that project, they need to upgrade the sewer line because it's not big enough and there's not enough capacity. That project gets to upgrade the sewer line, and the neighbors don't have to pay for that. So projects have to do the specific items associated with what's mandated for their particular project. It would depend on the system in that location. So how much upgrades needed? Do you need, 30 feet of upgrade, or do you need 300 feet of upgrade? It just depends on where you're going to get to the pipe that has the capacity, right?
You got that, you got the sewer, you got the power lines, you got the water lines, and some of those places are just not generating.
Yeah, a good point, and not so dissimilar from the one about downtown. I will say that the city's growth strategy still focuses on centers as the primary location for big growth. And so many of the places you're referring to are what we call mixed-use centers. So Proctor's a mixed-use center. Obviously, we see development happening there. South Tacoma, around 56 in South Tacoma Way is a mixed-use center. There's 17 of them in the city. Downtown is one of those centers. So those continue to be the primary location, and the city does have incentives to try to encourage growth and development in there. One of the obvious ones that people talk about is the multifamily tax exemption, which again comes with its pros and cons, like all of these things. But that specifically works in the mixed-use centers to try to create a tax break to encourage growth and development in those areas. So, and the truth is, the majority of infrastructure investment is largely in and around mixed-use centers. These are the areas for which we can generally get grant money because they're connecting centers, which is exactly what, both at the regional and state level, is where they tend to put the resources. Yeah, so he said his daughter has a house over on North 19th, and they've seen a fiveplex go up, or a 5-unit project go up, and another one in the works. Sounds like both in the works to some extent, not done. And obviously they're relatively close together and concerned about how much spacing is required and things like that. So they're townhouses essentially of some sort. Yeah. What I will say is that the standards do allow for a lot more density and buildings to be a lot closer. Probably. I mean, it depends on the lot size and things like that for configuration. Well, I don't know about care. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure it's so much a question of care. I mean, the policy choice that the state has made and the city made was to facilitate more growth and development. And that means more people, more buildings, closer, tighter together. Yeah, I mean, that's, sorry. I don't know what to say, but yeah, that's exactly what the code allows for. So.
The new setbacks allow other buildings on the property. How does this affect a designated historic district like also, or does that exceed this?
So interestingly, the North Slope has obviously had a variety of housing types in it since the early days of its development. In fact, as we were going through Home in Tacoma, it was commonly held up as one of the examples of a pretty successful neighborhood with mixed housing types integrated. So yeah, Home in Tacoma did modify the zoning in the North Slope Historic District. So in the same way of the cottage housing and the multiplexes and things like that, those are things that in Home in Tacoma now are allowed there. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's the vintage of multifamily from like 19 teens and 20s and 30s that everybody thinks fits pretty nice and does fit pretty nice in the North Slope. Then there's the 70s and 80s version of multifamily that at some level, no doubt, spurred on the whole conversation about reducing the zoning and creating the historic district. So while the home in Tacoma allowances do facilitate some of those smaller scale ones, they don't actually allow for the big, huge ones that we saw, like I say, in the 70s and 80s. So, but the other thing with the historic district, obviously, it has the design review still for new projects. So.
All the questions? Yes, this lady.
Yeah. Not yet is the basic answer. And one of the things I'll mention, and I can't remember if Peter mentioned parking conversations going on right now with the city, and so certainly a good opportunity for yourselves and the neighborhood council to provide input. The Planning Commission, I think, just released a parking code update, which essentially will remove parking requirements citywide, is what the current proposal is. And this is another scenario where the state is mandating probably half of that on us, not allowing, as part of Home in Tacoma and the bill that was adopted that pushed that included a number of parking allowance reductions, and the state is continuing to go down that path and remove the allowance for cities to require parking. Now, it doesn't mean you can't have parking, it's just whether or not the city can require parking has been a pretty consistent theme as a concern from a cost perspective, that parking costs money, and if we're trying to address housing costs, that eliminating this one.
Go, and then that's it. So, Bonnie?
Said this as a July 1st. This is the system development charges for wastewater and stormwater utility.
Yeah.
So I've read this a couple times, but I'm still very confused. So we have the older connection charge and the setup program that no longer. But this new one ensures that developers do not have to pay these charges, the development charges and connection charges simultaneously. What does that mean?
Basically, it was a shift in methodology. So the city used to charge a more significant connection charge for new development, and instead they've shifted over to a system development charge, which is more directly like an impact fee and recognizes not just the connection, but the impact on the overarching system that new development pushes. So all that's meaning is that we stopped doing the old version and moved to the new version. So. Yeah, so it's another fee in the list of fees that you're worried about. It's another one. So, yep. Mm-hmm.
That's why some of these developments 60 years old, because those facilities there. If you can't be just to the market, so plan ahead, market plan one. Government's supposed to plan further out. So, I mean, it'd be a bold step for the city to actually say, no, we're going to acquire property for the facility.
Yeah, we don't generally expect the developers to plan because they tend to operate much more short term than that. And at some level connects to your earlier point about business districts that are, I think, as you said, underperforming. The difficulty is that over the last 10 plus years, we've seen a pretty notable reduction in the demand level for retail activity in most areas. I mean, you could see a lot of gray and brown trucks driving around neighborhoods these days, delivering items for which people used to go to a store to pick them up. And so, yeah, we have a lot of commercial areas in the city that are challenged. I will say from a planning and particularly from a zoning perspective, there is, in most cases, absolutely capacity for those kinds of services, grocery stores and things like that in those business districts. We're just not seeing the market demand for it. And the city doesn't build grocery stores, obviously. In fact, we've actually seen the opposite, right? I mean, the Fred Meyer at 72nd and Pacific just shut down a year ago, you know, and removed a pretty significant community service to that whole neighborhood. So, yeah, an unfortunate trend. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then the planning and development part comes to responsibility with these other things. How do we develop communities that are going to work for our affordable housing, giving them the services they need and pay for. And we don't see that. So I think the city needs to go back from a planning and development perspective and do a better job analyzing how we can make this better. We understand the need for more housing. I still want to see the measurements of what is that really going to mean in our conditions. But it's working for what we're doing. And I know it's still early, a year in, but those are the questions that the community has that we think the city is kind of.
Yeah, I would just say you're right that there's not a lot on that slide because the truth is we haven't asked a lot yet. In part, well, in part because for the most part, the projects, you know, we haven't seen a lot of projects get completed yet. So I think that's definitely something that we're going to be doing as we continue through this process and build up over the next year or so. We'll get to that place where it will be much more appropriate to do community surveys and engagement at the level that you're talking about to get a better feel for how people feel like new development has or has not integrated well into their neighborhood. So yeah, totally valid point.
So one of your slides indicated that you're discussing where you go from this.
Mhm.
It sort of had a question mark. And I think certainly the feedback that you can take from us as the North End is we want Home in Tacoma to be more like a living document. We want it to be updated, amended to improve. Let's celebrate the successes, and where there's problems, we want those addressed. So I think I'm not just speaking for myself, but I think I'm speaking for the North End when we want this opened up. We want to see some changes, and we want you to acknowledge, not you specifically, but Tacoma to acknowledge that this isn't perfect and that it can be made better, and we want to help make it better. So having had that dialogue umpteen times with Elliot, you know, before he departed, and now thank you very much for coming and giving us the update. And if we're going to be doing updates on 6-monthly or annual basis, we'll be inviting you back. And so I'd like to say a big round of applause for. Thank you. And knowing the city, they are very responsive. So if you do have specific questions, you can reach out to the city, keep us in copy. Sometimes we can help get answers through our various contacts. I don't think there was any unfinished business from previous, and I don't think there's any new business apart from announcing that the next meeting will be our probably favorite meeting of the year when we address trees. So again, following last year's success, there will be a tree walk in the university area. And we will have the same person, Dr. Romy Aberley? I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it. Anyway, she did a great tree walk last year, so hopefully we'll see a lot of you here for that. And okay, point taken. Perhaps we can borrow the one from Tacoma on the Go. They seem to have worked out how to deal with microphones. That being said, if there's no other business, I'd like to thank you all for coming. I don't know what the soccer score is, and perhaps you don't want to know until you go home and watch it on repeat. But thank you very much, and see you next month.